Somewhere in America, right now, a 62-year-old is sitting at a kitchen table with a stack of paperwork in front of them. They've worked for almost 40 years. They've never missed a payment. And in about 20 minutes, they're going to make one decision, a small, quiet, forgettable decision that will cost them $181,680. They won't know it in the moment. Nobody sends a warning letter. There's no siren, no red flag, no second opinion required. Just a signature, a birthday, and a check that starts arriving a little early. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This isn't some rare, unlucky exception. As of June 2026, Yahoo Finance reported that 91% of retirees make some version of this exact mistake. Not a small oversight, not a fringe case. 9 out of 10 people walking into the same trap one at a time, thinking they're the exception. So before I tell you what the mistake actually is, I want you to picture the moment it happens, because it doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like relief. You turn 62. The job that wore you down for 2 decades is finally behind you, or close to it. You've paid into this system your entire working life, every paycheck, every deduction, every year you didn't get to keep as much as you wanted. And now, finally, it's your turn. So you walk in, you fill out the form, and you start collecting. Because it's your money, you earned it. Why on earth would you wait? That question, why would I wait, is the mistake. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why the answer matters more than almost any other financial decision you'll make in retirement. Let's start with the math. Nobody ever sits you down and explains. In 2026, if you claim Social Security at 62, the maximum monthly benefit is $2,212. Wait until age 70. Same person, same career, same lifetime of work, and that number becomes $2,969. Read those two numbers again because the gap between them, $757 a month, is where this entire story lives. Now stretch that gap across a retirement that lasts 20 years, which is a completely realistic assumption for someone retiring today. $757 a month, 12 months a year, 20 years. That's $181,680. Not a projection built on guesswork, just arithmetic. Sitting there, waiting for someone to do it. Here's why that gap hits so much harder than people expect. Claiming at 62 doesn't just mean a smaller check for a few years until things balance out later. It locks in a permanent reduction, roughly 25 to 30%, below what you'd receive at full retirement age, which is 67. For most people born in 1960 or later, that reduction doesn't shrink as the years pass. It doesn't quietly correct itself. Once you hit your 70s, it rides with you into every single month for the rest of your life, whether that's 10 more years or 40. And still, according to the Boston College Center for Retirement Research, 57% of Americans claim at exactly age 62, the earliest possible moment allowed by law, and not because the math favored it, almost always because nobody ever laid the math out in front of them, on paper in plain language, before the decision got made. Let's put that in context for a second. The average Social Security check in 2026 sits at $2,071 a month. This year's cost of living adjustment added 2.8%, a small cushion against inflation, the kind of number that feels reassuring when you read it in a headline, but it doesn't come close to closing a $757 monthly gap. A COLA adjustment protects the check you already have. It does nothing to undo a decision made at the wrong age, years earlier, when nobody was paying close enough attention. So if the math is this clear, why does more than half the country still walk straight into it? Because underneath that one big decision, there are 5 smaller ones hiding. Mistakes most people make without ever realizing they're making them. Let's pull each one apart, one at a time, because they don't all look the same, and they don't all cost you in the same way. Mistake 1 starts with a question almost nobody asks themselves. What if you don't die at 78? Most people who do think carefully about claiming age fixate on something called the break-even age, the point where waiting would have paid off, compared to claiming early. For most people, that lands somewhere between 78 and 80. And once someone finds that number, they usually stop thinking. They picture their own life expectancy, compare it to that number, and make a bet. But that bet is built on the wrong fear. It assumes the real risk in retirement is dying too soon and wasting the years you could have collected early. It isn't. The real risk, the one that actually ruins retirements, is living a long time and running out of financial room while you're still very much here to feel it. Nobody regrets a bigger check at 85. Plenty of people regret a smaller one. Mistake 2 doesn't start with a statistic. It starts with a woman named Linda, or someone very much like her. Linda is 74. Her husband passed away 2 years ago, and she's been living on his survivor benefit ever since. One afternoon, a friend suggests she double-check her account online, just to be safe. Linda almost doesn't bother. The government surely got the math right, didn't they? But she creates the account anyway, and there it is. A gap in her earnings record from a job she held for 3 years in the 1990s. Nobody ever caught it. Nobody was ever going to catch it, because catching it was never anyone's job but hers. This isn't a hypothetical fear. It's happened at scale. One documented case involved 8,618 widows and widowers whose benefits had been miscalculated by the Social Security Administration itself. The fix takes about 10 minutes. Go to ssa.gov, create a free My Social Security account, and look through your full earnings history year by year. If even 1 year is missing or wrong, your benefit calculation is wrong permanently, unless you're the one who catches it. Mistake 3 is built on a misconception. Almost every couple carries into retirement without realizing it that spousal benefits are some kind of bonus feature. They're not a bonus. They're half the equation. A lower earning spouse can claim up to 50% of the higher earner's benefit, even without ever having worked a single day themselves. And if the higher earner passes away first, the surviving spouse can step up to 100% of that higher benefit. Sit with that for a moment. If one spouse claims early and locks in a smaller number, that smaller number can follow the surviving spouse for the rest of their life too. This was never really a solo decision. It's two people's futures tied together, and it has to be planned on purpose, not stumbled into, because one person got impatient at 62. Mistake 4 comes with a number that catches almost everyone off guard. $23,400. That's the earnings limit in 2026 for anyone who claims early and keeps working. Go above it, and Social Security withholds $1 for every $2 you earn over the line. It's not a rumor. It's not a scare tactic. It's a rule written directly into the system, and most people never hear about it until their check shows up smaller than expected with no explanation attached. The good news is, the rule loosens considerably once you hit full retirement age. The limit jumps to $65,160, and the penalty drops to $1 withheld for every 3 earned above it. But that relief only helps you if you know it exists before you need it, not after. Mistake 5 is the quietest one, because nothing dramatic ever happens to trigger it. Nothing goes wrong. You just stand still while the ground shifts underneath you. 2026 alone brought a new tax break. For Americans 65 and older, updated income thresholds, the 2.8% COLA we already talked about, and rising Medicare Part B premiums, that quietly eat into that COLA before it ever reaches your bank account. Social Security was never designed to be set it and forget it. The rules move every year. If you don't move with them, you don't make a dramatic mistake. You just lose ground slowly without ever noticing the moment it happened. Now let's make all 5 of these real, because numbers on their own don't change behavior. Stories do. Picture 2 people, same career length, same lifetime earnings, same age, same health, standing at the exact same starting line on their 62nd birthday. The first one, let's call him Robert, claims immediately he's tired of working. The offer is right there, and $2,212 a month feels like plenty. When you're 62 and healthy for a few years, it genuinely is plenty. He travels a little, he relaxes, life feels good. But fast forward to 75, his knees aren't what they were. A hospital stay he didn't budget for. Eats through a chunk of savings in a single month. Medical costs are climbing faster than his fixed check ever will. The trip he always said he'd take someday quietly becomes a trip he'll probably never take. And because nobody ever sat him and his wife down to coordinate their claiming strategy, when he eventually passes, she doesn't step into his full benefit. She inherits whatever smaller number he locked in at 62 for the rest of her life. Now picture the second path. Same person, same starting line, but this time, before claiming anything, he sits down, maybe with a spouse, maybe alone at that same kitchen table, and actually runs the numbers. He waits until 70. That same $757 monthly gap we calculated earlier is now working entirely in his favor. His check is $2,969 a month instead of $2,212. Along the way, he and his spouse coordinated their claiming strategy together, making sure the higher benefit was protected before either of them locked anything in. By 75, he's not just financially stable, he's free. In a way Robert never got to be. He helps fund a grandchild's college semester without blinking. He finally takes that trip. And if he becomes the one left behind, his spouse steps into 100% of that larger benefit because someone thought about that possibility years in advance instead of discovering it too late, in grief, with no time left to fix it. Same decades of hard work, same money paid into the exact same system. One decision, made with the right information, or without it, is the entire distance between $181,680 lost and $181,680 kept. And underneath that number is something even harder to put a price on: the difference between quietly worrying through your 70s and actually living through them. So if you're watching this and thinking, I don't want to end up on Robert's side of that gap, here's exactly what to do about it, starting today. None of these 4 steps require a financial advisor. All 4 are things you could begin before this week is over. Step 1. Check your earnings record today. Go to ssa.gov, create your free account, and look at every single year listed, the way Linda eventually did. This takes about 10 minutes, and it's the only way to catch an SSA error before it becomes your problem for the rest of your life. Step 2. Calculate your actual optimal claiming age. Don't guess at it. Use the SSA's own online calculator or a tool like Open Social Security to model your specific numbers. As we've just shown, the gap between claiming at 62 and 70 isn't a rounding error. It's a 6-figure decision, and it deserves 10 minutes of real calculation instead of a hunch made on your birthday. Step 3. Coordinate with your spouse or your ex-spouse if you were married at least 10 years. If you're married, divorced after a decade or more, or widowed, you have options most people never even know exist. A lower earner claiming earlier while the higher earner delays can raise household income now while still protecting the surviving spouse later. This was never meant to be a solo decision, not when someone else's future is quietly tied to yours. Step 4. Plan for the tax side, not just the check itself. Social Security becomes taxable once your income crosses certain thresholds. The new 2026 tax break for people 65 and older can genuinely help, but only if you build an actual strategy around it, especially if you're also pulling income from a 401k or IRA in the same years. Here's what I want you to sit with as this ends. Retirement was never really about the number printed on a monthly check. It's about the 20, maybe 30 years of life you get to live after you stop working, and whether those years feel like freedom or feel like a slow, quiet tightening. You can't quite explain. Two people can pay into the exact same system for the exact same number of years with the exact same lifetime earnings and still end up $181,680 apart. Not because of luck, not because of income, because of one decision made with the right information or without it. If there's one sentence I want you to walk away with, let it be this: the check doesn't decide your retirement the date you claim it does. If you're 55 or older and something in this video hit close to home, send it to someone you care about who's getting near this decision. It might be the most useful few minutes you send them all year. And if you haven't checked your own Social Security statement yet, pause right here, open ssa.gov, and look. That single action, taking less time than finishing your coffee, could be worth $181,680 to your future. Check your record, coordinate your claim, protect that number, because right now it's still yours to lose or yours to keep.